过去来看一直都很少像这样的注射用药，因为鸦片类在这个社群并不常见，我们不常看到男同志有使用很高的这种药物注射比例，但我觉得药物模式的改变，甲基安非他命跟甲基甲基卡西酮这种药物，他们比过去更容易取得了，也改变了状况，所以他们开始倾向于注射，因为这些新药物去注射的方去的这种热门药物是不同的。这一类过去在同志之间很热门的药物，通常很少用于注射。所以，我们如果想要了解男同志他们使用注射用药的普及率，其实大部分的问题都在于我们的方法论以及收集这类资讯都没有一个标准。因此，药物调查通常都无法收集到性向资讯，因此我们不知道这些注射药瘾者他们是男同志，或者是男双性恋，还是异性恋。那相反的，性向调查在过去往往也都没有收集过这种注射药瘾的资讯，因此像这样子这种事，它其实比其他的调查都更容易在各种不同主要的调查中消失。还有另外一项挑战是，主要是虽然我们有关于注射药瘾的数据，却往往不是针对药爱，因此我们或许可以在调查中问男性是否有注射，但却不知道他是否真的是在性爱场景之下注射，它有可能发生在完全不同的情境，但我们同时也有理由相信它其实重叠的几率非常高。我在英国参与的一项研究中发现，这些药瘾注射当中有88.66%都是甲基安非他命与甲基卡西酮。那么我们从定性研究中也得知，大多数的甲基安非他命其实都是用于性爱性质。所以从这种不同的数据当中，我们可以拼凑出一个相对完整的故事。然而这些数据或者有一些延伸出来的数据呢，还是不太足够。所以我们如果看看世界各地不同的例子，也真的只有少数的例子，我们真的有收集到药瘾注射的数据。这个是 EMIS 欧洲男同志网络调查研究，是在2017年在欧洲30多个国家举行，参与调查总共有127万，12.7千人，这样的数据其实相当可观。那么你看过，我们会看到有2.6%的人注射过，1.3%的人在过去12个月注射过。那么在过去12个月注射过的族群当中，有34.4%注射过10次以上，可以视为是固定注射者。那么我们看我所在的澳洲，这个数据是来自于我们的 Flux 研究追踪变动生命的研究，这是一个纵向世代调查，专门以研究男性行为当中的模式药物使用。我们在这一轮调查当中有1995位男性参与，其中10.3%曾经注射过，4.7%在过去12个月曾经注射过。会比我们在英国观察到的数据要再稍微高一点，但是还是只占男同志族群的一小部分。而曾经注射的人当中，大概将近有17.2%，1/5的人是每周注射，43%是每个月注射，所以我们可以看出他们的使用比例。如果再往旁边看一点到纽西兰的话，有5.4%的人，他们会，也就是参与这种男性行为定期社群调查的人当中呢，5.4%曾经注射过，过去6个月当中注射过的是1.2%，比澳洲这边看到的数据要低。当然，距离大家更近的一些调查就是有小顾医师、Strong 医师、李医师及其他许多人在2018年进行的调查。当时我也有幸能够参与这个调查。这一个调查是针对从事药爱的男性进行调查，那是当初我们纳入调查的条件，他们必须要有从事药爱 性爱的药物使用。那在调查样品中，23.9%的人在过去6个月当中某部曾经注射过，因此我们能够很粗略地看出普及率大概是如何。当然也会是抽样的族群在哪里进行调查，以及在哪里招募个案，都会有非常大的差异。有几个研究，大概总共只有4-5个吧，探讨了男同志药引注射的关联。我就稍微强调几个，其中这一个是 Tullier 跟同仁他们一起进行的研究，他发表于2020年使用时空样本调查法，在法国5个城市的酒吧3温暖收集数据。那么抽样的族群是男性行为者，总共有2646位参与，3.1%的人曾经注射过，1.6%在过去12个月注射过，与我们比较广泛的 EMIS 全欧洲的数据相似，跟我之前这是我之前给大家看过的。那么在多变质分析中，他们有分享一下在过去12个月内与冰针药引注射的关联性，所以我们可以看到它的几率其实相对高很多，有过 C 肝病毒的几率是
higher odds of HIV as well. Sorry, that
是
second bullet point should read HIV with
还有
an
相
odds
对
ratio
高
of
的这个 HIV 的几率。
4.73.
抱歉，
Apologies for the
第二
error
点
on
其
that
实
slide.
上面应该要
And
写
furthermore, there was a
，HIV 几
10
率是
point decrease in
4.73，我
mental
打错
health
字了。
scores linked
然
with
后
the
在心理
experience
健
of
康分
slamming.
数与
I'm
冰
sorry, I
针的
also
关
keep
联
using these
在
terms
这里下降了
interchangeably,
10点，不
slamming
好意
and
思，我一直
injection
把
drug
冰针
use.
跟
I'm
药引注射
indicating a
混
very
合着
strong
使用，但是这
association
就
between
是让
poor
大
mental
家知
health
道，
outcomes
其实
and
心理
engagement
健
in
康不
injection
佳
drug
的结
use.
果跟从事药引注射其实有很强烈
Within
的
the
关
United
联。
Kingdom, a survey
我
that I was
在
part of in
2018
2018,
参与的英
data
国调
captured
查
from
中，在线上社群抽
16,464
样，
gay and bisexual men
从
online community sample,
16464位男同
and
志
there
与
we
男
saw
双性恋者
22.86% of ever
收
injected,
集数据，其中有
1.8% had done so in the last
22.86%
12
曾经
months.
注射过，
And
1.8%
some
在
similar
过去12个月
associations
曾经注
and
射
with
过。
that French
与
data.
法国
So
的数据其实有些
within
相似的
the
关联
last
性，
multivariate,
以阳性的几率
people
为
engaging in
11.46
slamming were
倍，而
considerably
且
more
也很
likely
有
to have
可
a higher
能
number
使
of
用冰针的
casual
人
sex
相对也
partners,
有
particularly
较高
casual
数量
partners
的
where
非
they
固
weren't
定性
using
伴侣，特别
condoms
是没
as
有
well,
戴
with
套的 非固定性
15.5
伴侣。同
times
时，我
the
们也
odds
进行
than
了，
those not engaging
我们
in
可以看
injection
到
drug use.
他们
And
其
within
实
that, we
分
also
数是
conducted a latent
几
class
率是
analysis and
15.5
that identified these
倍
three
高，
groups, by far the largest
是相较
of
于那
those
些没有
defined by
使
the
用
use
注
of
射药
crystal
物的。
meth and
那
mephedrome,
我们可以
the
辨识
second
出
group
这
defined
些
by the use
是
of opiates,
使用
kind
甲
of
基安
quite
非
a
他命
small
与甲
group
基甲
there,
基卡西酮的
7.9%,
3大族群，第二个族
and
群
a
是使
third
用鸦
group
片
by
类是
kind of
比
a
较小
very
的族
broad
群
spectrum
7.9%， 第三
of
个族
drug
群
use,
是
which
比
we
较
call
广泛的
eclectic
用药者，我们称为
drug
所谓兼
user,
容并
which
蓄
just
的
like,
用药
as
者，
I was
就
kind
像
of
我一开
alluding
始
to at the
提过
start,
的，其
helps
实
us
它
understand a little
就
bit
像我
about the
说过，有
context
助于我
within
们去
which
了解
drugs
最
are
常
most
用药
most
的一些
likely to be
情
used,
境，
even though we don't always
即
have
使我们的数据
specificity
常
in our
常都是
data.
不具特异性的。
And drawn from that
我
excellent survey which I
先
alluded to
前
a moment
提
ago
过，我
here
们
in
在台湾
Taiwan,
进行过的精彩调查当中，
there's some
其
really
实
valuable
有一些
associations
非
that I
常
wanted to
珍
draw
贵的
your
关联
attention
性，
to, and I
是我
really
想要
want to
让大
thank
家特别注意
Jiao and
的。
Lee
在这里，我要
for
特别感谢
providing
赵医
these
师与
analyses
李医
for me
师
to be
提
able
供
to
这些
present
分析
to
数
you
据，让
today.
我今天
So
能够
ours
跟
was an
各位分
online
享。
survey only
我
of
们当时
MSM
进行的是
engaging
网
in
络调
chemsex.
查
It was
而
promoted
且仅
via a
涵盖
range of
从
gay
事药
social
爱的男
media
男
in
性行为者，
2018, with a
在
large number
2018
coming
年
through
透过
Hornet.
广泛同
And there were
志
questions in
社
there
群媒
related
体
to
宣
drug
传，大部
use,
分
to
都来
sexual
自
behavior,
Hornet。
to indications
当
of
时的问题
dependence,
与用药、
and
性爱
experience
行
of
为、依赖
drug-related
性倾向、
harm as
药
well.
物
And there
相
were
关伤害的
515
经验
people
有关。
included in
当
this
时有
particular
515人纳入
analysis.
这一次的分析。
And within this,
那么
you
其中我们可以
observe
看
a
到许多
range
有
of
趣，
interesting
而
and
且
important
比较
and
有意思、比较
significant
重要，而且
associations.
显著
So
的
we
关
see
联。
that those with a
我们会
high
看
number
到
of
那些
sexual
性伴
partners
侣人数
are
比较多的
considerably
人，
more
他
likely
们
to have engaged
有
in
药引注
injection
射的
drug
可能
use.
性其实也高很
Those
多。
who abuse more
在
than
药
one
爱
drug
情
in
境
chemsex
情境
setting
下使
were
用不止一种
considerably
药物的
more
人，
likely to have
那
engaged
药爱
in
注射的
injection
可
drug
能
use.
性也是高很
Those with
多。
a history of
曾经
hepatitis
有
C
感染
infection
C 肝病
were
毒病
much
史的
more
人，
likely to
他们
have
药爱
engaged
注射
in
的可
injection
能
drug
性
use,
也
and this is
高
all within a
很多。
multivariate
这全部都
analysis.
是出自于我们的多
And
边际分
those
析。
engaging
而
in
那
injection
些
drug use are
有
also
药
more
注
likely
射的
to show
人，
signs of
也比较有可能出现甲
methamphetamine
基安非他
dependency
命的
established
依赖性， 而且
established
这是
using the
根据我
severity
们依
of
赖严
dependence
重度
scale.
量表的评
Interestingly,
估，
there
有
weren't
提示这一些
there weren't
跟年
many
龄
other
或收入
associations in
都
relation
没
to
有太
age
多其他
or
的关
income.
联。
In terms of the motivations for engaging in chemsex, well, these have been documented via several qualitative and quantitative studies over the last 4, 5, or 6 years. And this kind of this simplifies what is quite a detailed literature, helping us to understand the kind of situational contexts and personal contexts which contribute to engagement in injection drug use or engagement in slamming. A study that I led in 2016 and authored here by my colleague Peter Weatherburn describes how men felt that injection of drugs helped them to prolong their sexual experience, even more so than was the case when they were consuming drugs orally. Daniel Diemel and his colleagues in Germany found repeatedly men talking about how they felt injection of drugs helped to improve their sex drive, helped to ameliorate problems with a lack of libido. Nutshetel in the Netherlands very much felt in a similar way to Van Hout and their colleagues, and a few years later described a lot about how injection drug use facilitates a range of more adventurous sex activities, group sex activities, fisting activities. In particular, commonly talked about, and Van Hout and their colleagues talk a lot about how they felt this was to some extent a fetishizing of the risk, and engaging in injection drug use helped to facilitate acts that might otherwise be seen as taboo or unconventional. Dolengevich, Siegel, and colleagues in what I think was a Spanish study talked a lot about how injection drug use lowered inhibitions and again perhaps allowed people to engage in more adventurous sex or have the kinds of sex they really wanted. Bowie et al. Using data from the Australian Flux study that I mentioned a moment ago, and we documented here how injection drug use could, men described how it helped to make receptive intercourse more comfortable. And Amara, in a qualitative study, talks about how in France talks about actually about how it can be quite an intimate act as well. The act of injecting one another in a sexual context can bring about a form of connection and intimacy, which is quite deep, which is really quite significant. And if you look to other drug use literature, so outside of men who have sex with men and other populations, it's quite a well-documented phenomenon around feelings of intimacy and connection to other people in the context of injection drug use. So not an unusual finding, and interesting that we also see it played out within a sexual context here for MSM as well. In terms of the consequences of injection drug use, one of the ones I think we're most commonly concerned about, for good reason, relates to HIV. Now, and of course, MSM who inject drug use represent a really crucial overlap in HIV key populations. We tend to think of MSM and of sex workers and of people who inject drugs and as adolescents. We think about these as being some of the key populations. Now, of course, MSM injecting drugs very much overlap, and in fact overlap further when you understand that some of those also engage in sex work practices, they're paid for sex as well. So there's good reason for us to be concerned about injection drug use, about the risk of HIV. 特别是呢
However,
HIV 的感染风险。
although there's been a lot of concern raised about the
尽管大家特别
possibility
的担心
for
说
sharing of
共用
injection
针具
equipment
的
and
风
for
险，
needle sharing, it hasn't been
但
very
是
widely
呢，我们在文
documented
献或是
within
研究当
most of
中
the
并没
studies.
有这个
Our
广泛的记载。
research from
我
Australia
们澳
found
洲
that
的研究
although
发现，虽然说
8.6% of the
8.6%
sample of injectors,
的
people
注射者，
injecting, reported
他们说
receptive
他们其
syringe
实呢可以
sharing,
接受就是
all
共
but
用
one of them, all
针
but
具，
one person
但
in that
是
study reported
除了其中一
always
个人之外，其
sterilizing
他的
that
人都说，他
equipment
们在
before
重复的
reusing
共
it.
用这些
We
针具
have
之前，
seen a
他们
similar
都会
pattern
进
in
行
other
消
studies
毒。
as
我们
well.
在其他的研究也有看到类似
A
的一
study
个模
of
式。而
people engaging in
进行
chemsex
药爱的
recruited
另
through
外一
HIV
项研
clinics
究呢，是
in
来
the
自于
UK by
英国的一
Puffle,
项研究，是透
Patel
过这个
and
艾滋
published
的
in
诊所
2018
所
did
进行的
find
采样，
that
在
those
2018年的
injecting
确有
drugs
发
were
现，那
more
一些
likely
药引
to
注
have
射
a
者，
HIV
他们其实
positive
更
people.
有
Sorry,
可
I should
能
have said
是
the
这个
samples of
HIV
HIV
的
positive
阳
men.
性者。我忘了
And
说，不
those
好意思，
HIV
这些
positive
人呢，
men
就是
who
本来
were
就是
injecting
HIV 的阳
were
性感
more
染
likely
者，
to have a
所以
detectable
这些
viral
人呢，
load
他们很
than
有可
those
能
who were
是
engaging in
用药者又
chemsex
是
but
阳性感染
weren't
者的话，他们是有
injecting.
测
And
得到
so
的
we
病
do
毒
see
量
an
的。所以我们
association,
的
an
确看到
important
这里是有
association
一个非
there
常重要的关联度，
for
也就是说，
ART
对于
adherence,
这
but
个
we're not
ART 是
necessarily
不是有足
observing
够的依存性？
the
但是
sharing
呢，
of
我们并没有
needles
真
and
的观察
syringes.
到这
But
里
that's
有
something we have to
共用
be
针
have
具
to
的情
continue to
形，
be
所
very,
以我们
very
必须要
attentive
非
to.
常非常的
In
关注
terms
这
of
个
other
病毒的
health
发
related
展。
harms, well,
至
there's
于
a
其他
range
的
of
跟健康
these.
相关的有害的
And
情况呢，我们可以看
certainly
到有一些
studies
各
where
种
there's
情形。
comparisons
那当然，这
between
些
of
研
men
究
engaging in
我们来
chemsex
做比较
who
的时
are
候，看到这
injecting
些
and
进
those
行
who
药爱
aren't
的男性
injecting,
到底有
you
谁是
tend
有
to
药引注射，有
observe
谁没有？
among
我
those
们
who
进行
are
比较，我
injecting
们
a
可以观
greater
察到说呢，
likelihood
的
of
确是有
poor
在进
mental
行药
health
引注射
outcomes,
的人呢，的
a
确是
greater
会报
experience
有
of things like
更有
paranoid
可能有精神
ideation
健康的
or
问题，同时
hallucinations.
呢可能会有
There's
这个
also
幻觉。
documented
所以我们
cases
同时
of
有看到
track
一
marks
些
and
文
muscle
献当中的
damage
记
and
载，我
other
们可以看到这些
injection site
用
injuries,
药
which
的这个
perhaps speaks to
痕
the
迹，
fact
同时呢
that
这个肌肉也会
this is a
受
population
损。
who haven't
所以我们可以看到
often
这个族
injected
群，他们其实
much before. It
之前
wasn't
呢
that
没有
common
经常
among
的
this
注射，
community.
在这个社
So
群当
perhaps
中，
there
这
isn't
不
a
是非常常见
community
的情况。
knowledge
所以可能呢，这
about
并
how
不
to
是社
do
群
so
当中就有的
carefully
知识，
and
他们不知
safely.
道要怎么样小
And
心
then
的
I
来
think
用
beyond
药。
that, though, there are
我想
social
除了
and
这个之
personal
外呢，
harms
还有这个
associated
社
with
会跟
injection
个
drug
人的
use.
伤
And
害，也
there's
是
a lot
跟
of
药引注射有
stigmatization
关。
of
当
people
然，
who
跟
use
污
drugs
名
in
也很有
general.
关，特别是这些用药
And
成瘾的
there's
人
even, as I
的污
kind of
名有
alluded to
关。
at the start,
同
there's
时
even
呢，我
more
之前一开始的时候
stigmatization
就有说，
of people
甚至
who
呢那些
inject
在
drugs.
用
And that
注射的
stigma
人，他们的
exists
污名
within
更甚，
the
因为
MSM
这个污名呢
community
是
as
在
well.
这个
So we've
男性
certainly
性行为的社
documented
群
in
当
some of
中
our
也特别
qualitative
存在。
and
所以呢，我
quantitative
们在
work
研究当
how
中呢都有
people
记录下来，无论是直化或是
inject
量化
are
的研究，都可
stigmatized
以
by
看到这
other
些药引注射
members
者，
of
他
the
们呢
MSM
在这
community.
个男
And
性
we
行为的
know
社群当
that
中呢，也
stigma
会
is never
获得其他
productive.
人
Stigma
的污名的
simply
投
makes it
射。
harder
所
for
以我们
them
知
to
道说
talk
这
about
些污名会让他
any
们更难去
concerns
讨
they're
论这
having
些
in
问
relation to
题。
their drug
同
use.
时呢，
Stigma makes
他
it
们
harder for them to access
在
health
用药的
services
时候呢，
if
更难
they
获
feel
得
they
健
need
康
them.
的
So
照
we
顾，
need to be
尤其是他们都
conscious
需要的
and
时候。
attentive
因
to
此
that
呢，我
kind
们
of
必须要特别
consequence
意
as
识
well.
到这一点，那也特别的注意这个问题。
Just one paper that I
还有
think
另
is
外一份
particularly
研
worth
究，我想
drawing
也特
your
别的
attention
值得
to
让大家
and
了解
worth
一下，
reading if you have a
也非
moment
常值
relates
得大家
to
读一下。如果大家有
drug-related
时间的话，
and
这是跟
psychopathological
药物有
symptoms
关
among
的心理
HIV
社会
positive
的
men
症
who
状，
have sex
这
with
是
men. And
在
this is data
男性
drawn
行为当中的
from
艾
a
滋感
really
染者的一个
impressive
研究。
survey
这
and
个数
study
据
done
呢，其
across
实非常的了不起，
22 HIV
是
clinics
在西班牙的马德里
Madrid in Spain. And so among that sample, quite a large proportion engaged in chemsex, 29.1%, and of those, 15.7% engaged in slamming in the last 12 months. And just remember, this is HIV-positive men. And what they observed within this study is that compared to those not injecting, those who were injecting were much more likely to experience high rates of withdrawal and of dependence. They were much more likely to show symptoms of severe intoxication, including things like a loss of consciousness, and much more likely to experience paranoid thoughts and suicidal behaviors. And so I think if you look across these literature, there's not that many of them, but if you draw across the 6-7 studies that have focused on this issue, you do tend to observe clear indications of elevated experience of harmful outcomes among those who are injecting. To date, most interventions focusing on chemsex have been in relation to chemsex broadly. and most men engaging in chemsex are not injecting. As we saw with that previous data at the start, it's a minority of people within the population of people engaging in chemsex. So most interventions are focused at a kind of broad level, and they focus on helping with techniques such as motivational interviewing to help men think through the motivations and consequences of their actions. They focused on other forms of psychotherapeutic intervention. However, there are a few services which have focused specifically on injection drug use. And in the middle here, you see an intervention created by the Burrell Street Clinic in London, which were called SLAM packs. And within these is a range of safe injecting equipment, color-coded syringes, for example, to make it easier for you to remember if you're at a chemsex party whose syringe was whose. But also included within that pack are sachets of lubricant, condoms, actually information booklets around where you can access PrEP or PEP as well if you want to. And the poster on the far left of the screen is from a project called CONTA in Montreal, which provides a similar kind of package of resources that you can use if you're engaging in, if you're attending a chemsex party, and they can provide you with these sex party supplies, so safe needle and syringe equipment, condoms and lubricants, charts to help you kind of map out your use of GHB and gamma hydroxybutyrate as well, and help ensure safe dosing of that drug if you're using it as well. And I guess as part of the broader package then of chemsex harm reduction interventions is a focus on HIV biomedical interventions. And so I think with a recognition of a greater, a higher number of sexual partners, and the fact that there's a large number of HIV positive men engaging in the chemsex scene, some of whom may have a detectable viral load, or they may be more likely to have a detectable viral load when engaging in injection drug use, according to that one study. In that context, there's a lot of emphasis placed on promoting PEP and PrEP. And so you'll see a lot of interventions in various parts of the world signposting men towards these services if the healthcare workers identify that they're engaging in injection drug use. None of these interventions have been evaluated yet. I'm putting them on the screen here to just kind of illustrate what's currently ongoing, but none of these are at the point in which I could highlight evaluation data or talk about the efficacy of them. But there's certainly promising practice here that we can draw on. So just in summary, MSM engaging in injection drug use are a subset of those engaging in chemsex. It is quite hard to establish prevalence, but we're probably talking about quite a small proportion of the MSM population in total. However, in some contexts that can make up 15 or 20% of those engaging in chemsex. People engaging in chemsex are a subset of the MSM population, and those engaging in injection drug use are a subset of the chemsex population. It is associated, injection drug use is associated with being HIV positive, with a history of hepatitis C, with a high number of sexual partners, with polydrug use, and is associated with methamphetamine dependence and STI diagnoses in several different studies. There's quite a wide range of motivations, but there's a really key focus, I think, on helping to facilitate more adventurous sex. There's quite limited evidence of sharing of injection equipment, but there's also not much research on this. So I think we shouldn't assume that safe injection practices are always occurring. We always need to be educating men about this. And I think there is a real need for more research to focus on this topic. There are a range of harms relating to mental health, dependence, injection site injuries and psychosis, all of which seem more common among those engaging in injection drug use practices compared to those engaging in broader non-injection drug use practices. And service responses thus far have tended to focus on the provision of safe injecting equipment and on promotion of biomedical HIV prevention and of motivational interviewing. There's some good work going on there, but we need to wait to see what evaluations come from those interventions before we can make clear recommendations about how to scale those up. And I think that draws me very much to a close. I've included all of the references here that I spoke to in case people are interested to follow up those studies in more detail. And I just finally want to say thank you, 谢谢 for having me. And again, I'm really very sorry I'm not able to be there in person. Thank you very much.
OK， 接下来我们再度邀请顾医师上台，我们要进行第二个主题演讲。
Dr. Huw back on stage to introduce our second speaker of the session.
So our second speaker is Alex Garner. Alex is the Senior Health Innovation Strategist at Hornet, and he crafts all the sexual health messaging and develops social marketing campaigns and create digital content for the global audience of Hornet. And also he leads Hornet research on various topics ranging from COVID, PrEP, stigma, and also conversion therapy in collaboration with many renowned institutions such as UNA, Johns Hopkins, European CDC, and UCLA. So he's going to give us a topic on the global situation of harm reduction among GBMSM during the COVID pandemic. Let's welcome Alex.
Hello everyone and good day. I am so excited and honored to be able to participate in the 2020 Asia-Pacific Chemsex Symposium. My session today will be on the global situation of harm reduction among the gay community under COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Alex Garner. I am the Senior Health Innovation Strategist at Hornet, the gay social networking app. Essentially, I manage all of our health-related content, programming, and research. I have worked in gay men's health for over 25 years. I've been living with HIV for 24 years, and gay men's health and wellness has always been central to the work that I and we do, and we're very happy to be able to participate in this session at this very important symposium. So when COVID-19 began, we wanted to be able to better understand how it was going to impact our community and what we could learn from what they're experiencing during the epidemic itself, as well as all of the policy responses to mitigate the spread of the virus. So we conducted a global survey. We had 10,654 MSM on the app respond, and they were from over 20 different countries. The survey itself consisted of a number of different themes, from exposure to COVID, mitigation of risks for COVID, economics, HIV, and mental health. And mental health became a really important concern, particularly since so many people were reporting, a vast majority of people reported staying in during most of their COVID shutdowns and only going out for essentials or if they had to work. And of our respondents, 30% reported a feeling of isolation and 30% reported the experience of depression during the time that the survey was conducted. So that was the end of April for 6 weeks until the end of May. In addition, over 80% of respondents reported sexual dissatisfaction. They weren't having sex, they weren't hooking up, and their level of sexual dissatisfaction was quite high during this time. So we wanted to be able to figure out what might be some things that we can do to best respond to the needs of gay MSM during and after this time period. And one of the things that became evident was that sexual abstinence wasn't something that was going to last or be sustained for a long time. So what might be ways to give gay men the tools so that they can make informed decisions around their sex and their sexual health? So I think it's useful to start at the topic, which is the core of this discussion, and that is sex, gay sex. And sex is a basic human need, yet it is still something that is considered taboo or stigmatized or seen as immoral or wrong or bad. And gay sex in particular has had to endure all sorts of negative thoughts and expressions and prohibitions. And that has an impact not only on the culture, but on individual gay men in their sense of who they are and their sexuality. But gay men have formed social connections and networks through sex. Sex has been essential to our communities and to creating those sorts of connections. And it's important also to understand that historically, and even today, gay men risk all sorts of things just to be able to have sex with one another. We've risked violence, persecution, loss of job, family, as well as disease, including HIV and COVID. And it's important, I think the fundamental understanding is that gay sex matters. It has a value. It's important to our lives. It's important to our physical and mental health, and that we must work to ensure that that principle is advanced. So harm reduction strategies have been a central part of how we've responded to various epidemics and crises in our community. And the first one I would mention would be chemsex. So the question I always have whenever the topic of chemsex comes up is, what do we mean when we use the term chemsex? Because for many people, it means various things. Is it multiple drugs during sex? Is it only one drug, like say crystal methamphetamine? And the other question to accompany that is, why chemsex? Why does this drug during sex hold such an appeal to men? What does it do to increase pleasure? How does it lower inhibitions? How does it give a sense of connection? And if those things are important to gay men, how can they experience those things even if they don't want to use chemicals while they're having sex? And understanding the answers to these sorts of questions must inform all sorts of harm reduction strategies that are entailed for community health. And that also applies to HIV prevention and sex without condoms. There needs to be an understanding of the value of condomless sex for gay men, that there is a value in the intimacy and the pleasure that is derived through sex without condoms, and that it's not something bad that should be stigmatized or prohibited, but understood as one important part of gay men's sexuality. And that in turn informs how we think of it when we try to do harm reduction and prevention efforts around HIV. And then of course is the topic of COVID. So if these sorts of connections, sexual, intimate, pleasurable connections, are important in the midst of another global pandemic, how do we respond in a way that helps inform gay men so that they might be able to make informed decisions about their sexual health? And at the same time, how do we respect the self-determination of gay men so that they are supported as they determine for themselves what they want to do with their own bodies? And at the same time, how might we strengthen the mental health of gay men so that they have the skills to make these decisions, so that they have the confidence and the affirmation to pursue pleasure, sexual intimacy without it harming their mental health? So it's important to be able to look back on our first pandemic that can provide some lessons in terms of how we approach any harm reduction efforts. So in the beginning of the HIV epidemic and up until after the 2000s, there was a great deal of stigma against people living with HIV, stigma of HIV itself, stigma of gay men, and stigma around sexuality. And that stigma, much of it was created by social organizations, community-based organizations, as well as public health. And it really was fostered by an ongoing community effort to see either gay sex as bad or see the sexuality of people living with HIV as something that needed to be prevented. And we know that stigma is counterproductive. Not only does it do harm to the individuals who are being stigmatized in terms of their mental health, it also breaks the special trust between those who need to access services, say HIV testing, who fear that they might have a positive test result and then incur the sort of stigma that they see other HIV positive people around them experiencing. It also is important to put stigma in perspective. When we think about COVID now, there's been lots of response to people, gay men who go to parties during lockdowns, and lots of negative comments towards them online. And it's very easy to want to call them stupid or irresponsible or reckless, but it's a distraction from the larger structural issues that are at play: a lack of access to quality healthcare, particularly for LGBT people, a lack of safety net if one is unemployed, a lack of policies in place to ensure that if you're having to go to work, your needs are being taken care of and that you can do so safely. And now with COVID, it also reminds us that we have to be able to foster a stronger relationship between public health and gay men, because that's so essential for us to be able to trust public health in terms of the information that they will provide, and to know that we can go to them and not have to endure any sort of stigma or negative reactions, regardless of how we behave. And it's equally important to really think of how we can seize this opportunity with COVID to learn lessons from the past, but also to shift our priorities in terms of gay men and gay men's sexual health. So one of those opportunities is, how do we prioritize pleasure and intimacy? How do we realign our thinking to realize that now we have an opportunity to ensure that gay men can pursue pleasure and intimacy, that they can mitigate risk, and that we understand its value and its impact on the lives of gay men. And that was the driving force for us when we worked in collaboration with Prepster UK to create a guide around gay sex during COVID. So we created this guide, How to Have Sex These Days, Navigating COVID When Horny, and it was translated actually into 9 different languages. Our goal was for it to be sex positive, affirming, dynamic, colorful, creative, cheeky, all sorts of things. The entire campaign is available here at this website, prepster.info/COVID and sex. All the different languages are available there as well, all the graphics that are usable and shareable. And I'm going to go through a few of them for you today to give you a sense of how we decided to approach this topic in hopes of informing gay men and engaging them as well as we could. So first and foremost, we wanted to start with virtual sex. So what needs to happen if you're stuck at home all day during quarantine or some sort of shutdown, yet you still want to pursue some sort of sexual connection, have sexual gratification and pleasure. And so obviously that means that virtual sex becomes a really important tool that we have to ensure that people can still have those connections, but they can be done via phone or text or video, yet those needs can still be met. And then of course there's all sorts of intersecting issues when we think about COVID, and HIV is a very important one. So as gay men get out of their shutdowns or their quarantine, how do we ensure that they're informed and prepared to start engaging in sex again? Are they monitoring for STIs? Do they have a full supply of their PrEP or their HIV treatment? Are they able to access their healthcare providers? The goal really to remind them that even though we're contending with COVID, HIV is still something that we need to be concerned with, STIs are still something that we need to be concerned with, and that there are measures in place to ensure that people can still have pleasurable sex and mitigate the risk of HIV. And then when we talk about sex during COVID and people venturing out and making all sorts of connections, we also wanted to encourage gay men to be creative, be kinky, do what you can to limit your risk, but make your decisions based on accurate information. One of those considerations has been putting a physical barrier between you and the person you're having sex with. A glory hole is one example. It's gotten a lot of attention from recommendations out of places like New York and Canada, but it certainly is something that gay men are quite familiar with and can be an effective way to mitigate some risk and exposure. And then finally in the guide, we wanted to be able to end with something that was encouraging, affirming, and showed that we're all in this together, that eventually this pandemic will come to some resolution, that it's not our first experience with a pandemic, and that we have skills that we've cultivated from the HIV epidemic that can apply to this, and that we'll be able to get through this together, that when this is over, we'll have cultivated skills, we'll have a stronger community, and eventually things will realign so that our sexual health will still be approached in a way that prioritizes sex, pleasure, and intimacy, and also empowers or continues to empower gay men as they make choices around their sexual health. And that we could use this as an opportunity to prioritize mental health, prioritize sex and pleasure, and really begin a new narrative about what is important in gay men's sexual health. So with that, I say thank you so much for taking the time to be part of this symposium today. Thanks again to everyone at the symposium for inviting me to be part of this. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much.
谢谢 Dr. Adam 跟 Mr. Alex 所带来的视频。
Thank you, Dr. Adam, for the video and presentation. Now we would like to welcome Dr. Li Jiawen from the National Cheng Kung University Internal Medicine.
那我今天要介绍我们接下来两个讲者。
So I'm going to introduce to you our two speakers today. One is Mr. Woong Cho from South Korea.
From research group POP. My presentation is
After returning to Korea, he joined the Jingusai, which is a gay men's human rights group, and has been active member ever since. While his full-time job is to develop global market for Korean fashion brand, his volunteer work focuses on community-centered and marginalized issues, including chemsex, HIV/AIDS, sexuality, and its interwoven relationship. He also started a group called the HAVES in Jingusai for people living with HIV, and is a founding member of research group Power of Pleasure. Today, he is going to give us a talk about chemsex in South Korea. Let's welcome his talk.
Hello, my name is Woong Cho from research group POP. My presentation is on general overview of chemsex in South Korea. I wish I can give you the presentation with more tangible data or concrete survey on chemsex, but it is still a very new concept to the LGBTQI rights activism and also to the community, not to mention the mainstream society. POP is the very first one to speak out about this issue, and it was only because I have been engaging in chemsex for a long time, and I knew that it was a growing quote-unquote trend in gay community. Just for your information, I'm sober now. Because I have also been involved with the gay rights organizations, I could reach out to my friends for help. My difficulty was the huge disparity between the life that I was living in real life and the experiences that I was having during chemsex. I just had to understand what this is and had to make my voice heard, along with many others whom I encountered in these settings. I knew we were there and our problems were real, so I got together with a renowned queer feminist activist who worked at the organization called Women with Disabilities Empathy, named Tarina, to study, listen to other users' voices, and find ways to help those in need of help. POP is an abbreviation for Power of Pleasure. As probably similar in many other countries, chemsex issues among MSM center around his pursuit of pleasure and intimacy, and it is also the reason that the chemsex is so prevalent in gay community. In Korea, pleasure is considered to be a privilege limited to certain gender, class, and social status. Consequently, pleasure is linked with exercising this privilege. It is similar with the case of HIV/AIDS. You got infected having sex. It's your fault for exercising that privilege. There is a sense of guilt that comes with chemsex and HIV/AIDS. Ultimately, the perception of the pursuit of pleasure as privilege with the sense of guilt hinders community or government from providing resources such as necessary information and health service in case one's life is jeopardized during or after chemsex. That's why it's important to bring together and connect issues that center around pleasure. They are HIV/AIDS, chemsex, also sexual desire by disabled people. In Korea, there is absence of data that connect these groups in Korea, so we are collecting and finding relevant data from Japan, Taiwan, Australia, and England. And also, through direct contact and conversation with users, we hear experiences and try to understand its relevance. Many in gay communities stigmatize drug users by claiming that chemsex is only limited to some problematic junkies, and it hinders users from sharing experiences and asking for help. And also, people living with HIV are getting more and more accepted, but their image as my sex partner is still considered to be a taboo. You are okay, but you cannot be my sex partner. It strengthens the connection between HIV status and drug use in Korea. In chemsex settings, you don't care about your or your partner's HIV status. It's almost given consensus among Korean users that power of pleasure overcomes the risk of infection. Here, POP's perspective is of course no judgment, and we try to give support based on tangible data that we collect from many different resources, and also focus on users' lives from collective viewpoint on pleasure and health. It's quite interesting to know that the drug use in Korea was quite prevalent before it became widely used in chemsex settings in gay community. Until drugs were effectively propagated as evil by Korean government, most types of drugs were used throughout decades. Before 1945, the year of independence from Japan, Korea cultivated opium, and it was the producing country to other Asian countries under Japanese supervision. Since 1950s, there was an anti-communist sentiment in South Korea. The government believed that the drugs not only destroy individuals, but also the development of the country. Government's general direction toward raid and heavy criminalization were established then. Direction away from public health issues and toward exclusion and segregation were established, which is unfortunate. In 1957, narcotics law was enacted. military government suggested the realization of healthy society with a social cleanup and economic growth promotion. To secure labor force, they intentionally propagated drug use as evil by enforcing the new community movement and brainwashing citizens. Until 1980s, Korea was an exporter of methamphetamines to Japan, but once the government blocked its routes to Japan, it started circulating within Korea across night entertainment locations in Seoul and Busan. When trying to understand Korean situation regarding drug use and chemsex, we need to distinguish drug use, especially chemsex, from crimes using drugs. As mentioned earlier, Korean government's intentional propagation of drug use as evil led to heavy criminalization. Because there is such stigma toward drug use, people tend to consider drug use as heavy crimes. To get rid of this stigma on chemsex, decriminalization of drug use should be precedented. One symbolic case was the Burning Sun scandal. Seungri from K-pop group Big Bang was involved with the different drug-related scandals centered around a nightclub called Burning Sun. Rape cases were reported using GHB. It only strengthened stigma against drug and chemsex when it should focus on the crimes. Next, I will share how chemsex issues have been reported and what POP's findings have been. In 2010, the first known media report on chemsex shook Korean society with explicit wordings such as AIDS, drug, and party. In 2014, TV news showed an actual video clip of a police raiding a home party. At the time, even the LGBT community did not know how to respond to this issue, even though some organizations made public statements about biased wording of the media reports. It was not active enough, and the case was left alone as their problem. So far, I gave you an overview on drug issue in Korean society and how it is connected to chemsex in our community. Now I would like to share our findings on chemsex. So why do we engage in chemsex and continue? The elements of chemsex, of course, ice is the main composition, and it also includes poppers, Viagra, and GHB. Also, dating application and messenger like Telegram to enable certain relationships based on fast communication and lack of trust. And also, building connection through a circuit party and gay tour throughout Asia is an important element of chemsex. Slamming is also a big part of a Korean chemsex culture rather than smoking. Because it is so expensive here, users do not want to waste any bit. Standard price is about 30 times higher than my knowledge of the price in Taiwan. I mean, it could change, but based on my knowledge so far. The high price of ice brings other problems as well, because when you lack the resources to buy ice, you engage in other illegal activities. And the reasons for use. I mean, there are many different reasons, but we believe that the desire for relationship and intimacy and also pursuit of maximum pleasure could be the reasons for use. And other reasons would be the solution to stress and way of compensation. Sometimes it can also be desire to sustain daily lives and pleasure simultaneously. Chemsex is also highly related to being self-conscious about body image and HIV status. It could also be about solution and also avoidance to unsatisfactory sex, and fear and failure to dating and relationship. Chemsex became prevalent because it enables role-playing like S&M and also the realization of fantasies, including public nudity and gender expression like cross-dressing. Complicated layer of relationship in chemsex settings make things very difficult. There is a hierarchy. Whether you have muscles or not, whether you have the expensive eyes to share or not. All of these layers make the experiences very difficult. I mean, it is also based on my experiences. There is no perfect chemsex setting. Some things always meant to go wrong. One of the biggest problems is also the police entrapment and target investigation. Often, police are on the gay application to find guys with eyes to entrap them. This fear often becomes side effects by chem users, and it brings out the unrealistic fear of getting caught. When this comes out in chemsex settings, it makes the experiences very painful. Another thing is that the effects of drug does not create new phenomenon, but amplify what has already existed. Therefore, the use of drug is inevitably related to some very personal and social contexts from their past experiences. Also, when we encounter users who want to quit or use less, we gain the experiences from the David Stewart's chemsex care plan, which I will mention later in the presentation. When a user can picture better life and or life that the person wants and plans and execute the picture, attitude toward drug becomes different. It is important to maintain lives without the impact of drugs by fostering relationships and other responsibilities. When it is possible, the impact of drug is rather relative and not absolute. Next part is POP's efforts and activities so far and what our plans are for the future. What we wanted to do is to tell the community that someone is trying to talk about these issues and we are here if anyone needs help. That is why we came up with this website called Chemsex Support Korea. We collected many resources from all over the world, from David Stewart, Taiwan Hotline, Japan, Thailand, and so on. Also, we added Korean-specific issues to this guideline. We have been trying to distribute the website address through different means, such as different organizations, and also we distributed lube at the Pride Parade. I'm sure most of you are associated and acquainted with David Stewart. We also had great inspiration and resources from his work. We provided translation for chemsex care plan, and he added this Korean version to his website for us. We did the screening of the Singaporean web drama People Like Us twice last year. Our purpose was to tell the community that it is our issue within our community, and also we are here speaking out if anyone wants to come for help. We also try to engage in international networking. Our purpose of this is that, as I mentioned earlier, chemsex is cross-country issue from circuit parties to gay tours. Also, because we lack research and resources, we rely on your research to get help. And the picture is from last year's Chemsex Symposium in Taiwan. I'm not sure why we are not smiling, but it was a great experience. When there are issues related to drug in general or chemsex, we try to make public statements from our viewpoint. The purpose for this is that someone is speaking out for our community based on harm reduction policy and without stigma toward users. We had great inspiration from last year's presentation, especially by Rod Olet from the Philippines, and how he brought together a number of people for a focused interview. So POP is working on that right now, interviewing those who engage in chemsex and study behavior and difficulties from their experiences. And hopefully we will be able to share a report early next year with you. And our general efforts are listed in the slide. Last of all, thank you so much for this opportunity to share our work with you and also giving us more inspiration and ideas of what to do next. Thank you.
那我接下来要介绍我们下一个来自越南的。
I would like to present to you the next young speaker, Mr.Doan.
Active in community health and rights, especially young one and the most vulnerable group in the society, to ensure their well-being and equity. Mr. Tung has been managing several projects and studies targeting LGBT community, coordinating the LGBT network in Vietnam to organize Viet Pride and the first LGBT National Summit, called Stronger Together last year. His work has been recognized by the LGBT community in Vienna, and he was just awarded the Hero Award 2019. He has been very active in the issue of LGBT group in Vienna and around the world with great achievement. Today, he is going to give us a talk about the overview of chemsex in Southeast Asia and the harm reduction experience in Vienna. Let's welcome his talk.
Hi everyone, greeting from Vietnam. My name is Tung and I'm Executive Director of Lighthouse Social Enterprise, an LGBTIQ and young key population lead organization working for health and rights of the community. I'm very happy to be here today and share with you a little knowledge and experiences of Lighthouse on the chemsex and harm reduction for the community. And my presentation is focused on some data on chemsex in the region among gay and bisexual men and who have sex with men. As you know, that we don't have much of data regarding the chemsex and also harm reduction. There are some data and some numbers on the prevalence of chemsex range differently among gay, bisexual men who have sex with men according to the countries. If you look into the screen, you can see in Vietnam, just estimate around 15% of MSM using methamphetamine during sex in the past 3 months, and almost 18% with drug use for sexual pleasure in the past 4 months in Thailand, and 7% in Malaysia, and almost 10% in Singapore. And the community also using very multiple types of drugs in chemsex. Amphetamine type stimulants, ATS, is most preferred by the community. And the most common is methamphetamine. So people refer to meth or ice or crystal meth. People also use ecstasy and Mr.Doan. And they also use combined with other drugs like popper and Viagra, ketamine and GHB and GBL. In Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, tablet meds are most commonly used among the community. And data show that the situation of the using meds has also increased in Myanmar. And in Vietnam, crystal meth is commonly preferred by MSM community. And looking to the figure, the seizure of methamphetamine in East and Southeast Asia from 2011 to 2019, you can see it's increasing, very fast among in Southeast Asia. And there are also some factors in law enforcement related and associated with chemsex. Most of the data showing that engaging in chemsex or using drugs, it can increase the risk with HIV and STI, and also high-risk activities like unprotected sex, and ICE party is regular happens among the MSM and trans community, which it's come with many risks, including rape or violence because of power relationship between ICE providers and younger men. And people who use drug face brutal law enforcement that makes them tend to conceal their drug use and drive them away from the harm reduction services. And there are some examples, like in Philippines, an official statistic released in July 2018 suggested around 4,500 people who use drugs has been killed due to extrajudicial killing. And also Singapore, they also have very tough law about illegal drugs, punishes possession of even like minor amounts of illegal drugs. And in Vietnam, we are very proud to have very first, high fund study focused on, explore the cultures of the high fund community, and also identifying the excuse and needs of the community with these services. And in the first slide, I want to highlight the different languages that community refer, and they also use when they looking for the sex partners or they communicate with people within the community. So it is a mix of the English slang and also Vietnamese slang. And why MSM likes to use ATS? It's very easy to access and buying the drugs. Some people face with the depression and isolation and negative impact, peer pressure. Also, some people, they want to increase sex pressure, and some people also face with mental health issues. So drug helps them to improve the emotion and change the sexual life. Here is the reason why people engage in chemsex from our study in 2019. So the highlights is increased pleasure when they have sex, and increased arousal. And some people say that it's helped them to enhance confidence when they perform the new sex behavior, like group sex or BDSM. Some people curious on, like how different feeling when they use drugs, having sex. And some people also enhance confidence in self or body or sexual organ. And about the chemsex partners, most of them found their chemsex partner from the dating apps like Garner, Jack, or Blue. And some of them, connect with other people through the social network like Facebook and Zalo. And some of them has introduced by their friends in the MSN groups, and very few on the Sonas and also other forums. I want to highlight that 35% of them has at least 2 sexual partners per one chemsex section, and 31% know nothing about the HIV and STI status of their sexual partners. And from our qualitative data, and some of people indicate that they often meet only one time, rarely meet second times. If they like each other, they might invite to join when there are not enough participants. And high funds, people that define the high fund is behavior among many people, but not between 2 people. And that increased a lot of the HIV risks among the chemsex community. In terms of the healthcare service experience, we found that 8% of our respondents self-reported that they are living with HIV. But it's so shocked that only, nearly 40% of them have been used PrEP, and 40% of them never been tested for any STI before. Even with HCV and HPV is higher. It's 45% never been tested for any HCV before. And for HIV, it is almost 21%. They have never been tested for HIV. The community faced with a lot of barriers and challenges when they want to access to the healthcare services. And one of them is very key is stigma and discrimination from healthcare providers because they engage in chemsex. Like more than 36% of them have been charged by the healthcare provider because they engage in chemsex. And also more than 30% have been lectured by healthcare provider because they engage in chemsex. So it's really, when stigmatized, it still exists in healthcare setting. So it means that it's still very barrier for the community to access with harm reduction and also HIV services. And from our study, we identified the multi-level of barriers that faced by the community with different levels. So the first one is personal level, lack of knowledge, understandings on drugs, harms, and also harm reductions, self-stigma, fear of disclosure, substance dependency, and also mental health problems. In terms of the community level, stigma toward chemsex engagement within the MSM community is one of very big barrier. In terms of the services, they have very limited information in appropriated time schedule, lack of the services, stigma from healthcare providers, all those, like barrier them to access to the adequate services. In terms of structural barrier levels, stigma towards substance user, MSM, is very heavy in Vietnam, and substance use is still criminalized in our country. And from that findings, we designed one interventions package for the community, which is really focused on remove the barriers I just present before. So the first part of the intervention is increase knowledge and generate demands of the community in terms of HIV services and harm reduction services. So you can see we developed a website, it's named G-Town. G-Town stand for Gay Town, where we provide them a lot of information on sexual health, healthy lifestyle, on how they can protect themselves when they have sex with drugs. They can access also with self-test kit, and also with other services like PrEP and PEP, and also HIV treatment. We also developed on fan page, it's the same name, G-Town, where we can, outreach to hard-to-reach community on social media and link them and connect them together in one platform and provide them adequate and accurate information on harm reductions and drugs. And Lighthouse just launched one apps on smartphone. It's called Hunt. Because when we do interview with chemsex people, and they say that all of young people and chemsex people, they like to hunt the sex partners on social media. So that's why our app's name Hunt. We provide a service map where they can locate it, where they can recognize some friendly services near them, and they can come there to get the harm reduction package and also with HIV services. And the next part is provide harm reduction service and products. You can see in here we have a lot of the harm reduction products. We have the condom and lubricants with the good quality. We have PEP and PrEP delivered to the community. We have outreach programs, not only online, but also offline, and also community events. We have the HIV and STI testing and treatment. People can do self-testing. People can use mobile testing and on-site testing in our clinic. We also organize some community discussions and event and workshop on high and fun on drugs. And from there, people can share their perspectives and knowledge, and we also can provide them adequate information from there. And screening and counseling on mental health and addictions of the drugs. We use ACIDs, Tung, and DAS21 to screen people's, and if people have any problems with addictions and mental health, we will refer them to professional services in Vietnam. We also focus on building capacity for peers, educators, and healthcare providers. We actually organize the number of the sensitization training for healthcare providers, where they can learn on how they can communicate with the MSM and trans community, and also how they can understand the issues and needs of the community and provide the friendly and quality services for them. We also have the practice between our peers and also healthcare provider to make sure that they can apply what they learn into the practical. And we also provide some training for peers, educators from a different MSM and trans CBO as well. And it's very interesting when we ask people about the high fun, what does it mean? And many people saying that because in Vietnam, high is similar to number 2. So they think that's high is mean that they have sex try time. And also high is mean like they bring, two of them will have sex on the high plates. So that is misunderstanding when people don't know about the languages and understand the community. So we're trying to address that. In next step, we are mobilizing the resources to first organize the community consultations on chemsex intervention initiatives, even that we have a lot of the pilot activities, but you know, it's still in very small amount of community members. So we're trying to gather the ideas and information from different CBOs and different pilot programs and develop a national intervention programs and proposals with the Ministry of Health to pilot and implement it in large scale in the countries. We also think of develop chemsex first aid and self-care, where we found that people are really lack of knowledge and understanding on first aid and self-care. And next is harm reduction products, produce the play and safe package. So it's not only, you know, condom and lubricants, but also the clean syringes and also other needed products for them when they, before and after when they engage in chemsex. We also want to maintain the existing chemsex intervention and harm reduction because from our data, it's have a positive impact to the community, and sensitized healthcare provider, of course, very important. Stigma reduction faced by the chemsex community, how can we reduce that? Also one question that we need to answer in the coming times, and building capacity for other CBO in outreach, communication, and counseling. You know, very early, I think in Vietnam we are very lucky when Ministry of Health and Vietnam Administration of HIV/AIDS Control, they took approve for the event drive-in PrEP is it's very new, and I think it's good strategy for chemsex community to protect themselves, at least with HIV, and increase the healthy lifestyle for them. And the next activities is disseminate the chemsex issues and brainstorm the joint effort. You know, in Vietnam, we have the field experience, and I believe that in other countries, there are many expertise people working on chemsex and on the same issues of the community. So we're trying to gather and bring people together and discuss on what is the joint action we need to take in the future to, you know, eliminate the HIV infections among chemsex community. And lastly, but definitely not least, we will continue to deliver one-stop shop service at Lighthouse Clinic as a very friendly space for the chemsex community. And thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy for any question for me. Thank you.
好的，感谢我们李佳雯医师主持本段的专题演说。
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for moderating this speech. Next, we would like to invite Dr.陈亮妤from KPCC from Songde Hospital to moderate the final session of this morning before the QA. Hello, I am from KPCC, Kunming Prevention and Control Center, and I am Dr.陳亮妤. I am very happy to be at the symposium today, and I am very honored to introduce our next speaker.
He's a regional manager, Asia for Mainline, a Dutch organization focusing on health, right, and people who use drugs nationally and internationally. He is also a very active leader in the team of international harm reduction and HIV program in Asia and also in other countries. So let's welcome his talk today with our big hands. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Taiwan. Welcome to this live recording from the Netherlands. I feel honored to speak at the Chemsex Symposium. So when people ask me what I do for a living, I normally answer, I work in drugs and sex. Well, that is the exact moment where you've got the attention, because everybody likes it. It can be exciting, sometimes a bit dark, but especially it's good fun. So for a lot of people it's fun. Some a bit less. Some of them are engaged with the wrong incentives. It can become problematic with uncontrollable use. Sexual health issues, mental health issues can arise. And even vulnerable people are getting more vulnerable because of many reasons. So this is the reason I would like to talk with you about chemsex. I would like you to share the situation of the Netherlands, but also what you as a professional, as a peer, as a researcher, or even government official can do. So, well, first I put a face to the voice. My name is Veldwijk. I'm from the Netherlands and I have a master's in health sciences. I work for Mainline, and my role as regional manager Asia consists of coordination of international harm reduction and HIV programs. I've been leading the chemsex team to strengthen the international response. Today I would like to talk with you about 4 things. First about Mainline, then about chemsex in the Netherlands, sharing some data, and very importantly, what are the different interventions that we have developed to improve the health of MSM and TG engaging in chemsex. So first about Mainline. During the 80s, there was a heroin epidemic in the Netherlands. We saw a lot of users on the street. HIV started to come in, and the police, they didn't know what to do. So something needed to be done, and Mainline was one of the first organizations that provided harm reduction services for people who use drugs. So since then, we have been providing harm reduction services to people who use drugs for more than 30 years. We use the harm reduction approach in our national work, but also in our international work. So internationally, we have been strengthening local organizations to develop interventions and also building skills and knowledge to implement these interventions in a quality way. So in 2016, we have started to get the notion that more people, especially men who have sex with men, are using drugs in a sexual setting. We call it chemsex. And well, since that time we started developing interventions, but also providing training to professionals who have been dealing with this group. So what is chemsex in the Netherlands? So here starts the problem already. What falls under it, what not, what substances, even what target group. So our definition includes a wider range of substances, but really sticks to the specific intention. So not going to a party, drop an ecstasy pill to dance, a good time, and maybe have sex afterwards. We use the term chemsex exclusively for men who have sex with men because of specific issues involved, like being gay, your HIV status, the dating app hookup culture, but also internalized homophobia or loneliness. We are aware of drug-driven sex in other populations, such as male sex workers, transgender communities, and we acknowledge that, but also we think that different target groups have specific needs, have different approaches, and also require different interventions. So some numbers on chemsex in the Netherlands. First of all, it's really hard to estimate a true size of MSM engaging in chemsex because it's a hidden population. Well, the group is not always willing to share such personal information to healthcare professionals. Plus, well, the definition issue also results in different numbers. So we use, following our definition, well, we see that 14.1 to 26% of MSM are engaged in chemsex. If you look at where we are in Europe, we can see that we are number 1. The reason behind that is not really well researched. Could it be because Amsterdam is one of the party capitals of Europe? Could be, but also Paris and London and Barcelona are quite party capital. Another reason that crystal meth is more prevalent in the Netherlands, it could be, but then again, it hasn't been researched. So to get a better sense of how chemsex engagements is there within the MSM community, you must understand there are different clusters. There's a group of MSN who actually don't take drugs in a sexual setting, maybe in a party setting, yes, up to, well, a chems group where MSM are using crystal meth and for MEC and 3-MMC in a sexual setting. So if you look at the different groups who are using drugs, who are not using drugs, I think in intervention you have to be aware of, well, the characteristics of this group. Also looking at substances, the use of different kinds of substances and the modes of administration are different in, well, in countries where we work in. For example, in the Netherlands, we see that around 65% of the people we interviewed who they inject crystal meth. And that is quite comparable to the European situation, if you can look at the table below. Another interesting observation is, well, the introduction of new psychoactive substances. These substances are still legal, they are not on the opiate list, and they can be obtained in a legal way on websites, for example. The issue here is that these substances are not well researched, and also we don't know a lot about, well, the physical and mental issues of this substance. The last, recreational use versus problematic use. We shouldn't forget that there's a large group of people who is really enjoying chemsex. They see the added value, they have the added value, but, well, they don't face any issues. So, in terms of providing support to people engaged in chemsex, we should also tailor our support to them. So there are different issues that arise when chemsex becomes problematic. First, it starts with injecting itself, skin infections, abscesses, but also more threatening health conditions. Other issues are STI, HIV, and HIV. It is interesting to mention, though, that the influence on chemsex on these three diseases hasn't been really shown in the Netherlands. The men test more and are very often on PrEP. While we know that international there's an increased risk of STD and HIV among chemsexers, this is not really shown in the Netherlands. Anyway, in the Netherlands, PrEP remains a feasible and effective HIV prevention tool. Talking about mental health issues, these can arise as a result of prolonged drug use. Examples are concentration, anxiety attacks, psychosis, and even suicidal ideation. Another issues are more focused on the sexual part. Combining heavy drug use with group sex in a private setting without much control and oversight can lead to situations in which, well, the sexual boundaries are disrespected. So there's a lot of pressure from peers to perform, to have different unwanted sexual behaviors, and even rape often takes place. Another issue that more people, they cannot enjoy sex without chems anymore. Losing control is another thing. 10% of people we have interviewed share that they need professional counseling, and they also think they cannot control the use in a good way. So I think we should look at chemsex in a structural context. There are cultural and religious attitudes who have filled public imagination with disgust towards homosexuality, and also the trauma of the AIDS crisis have further associated gay sex with risk and danger. There is this online hookup culture that really causes a lot of pressure on gay men. You have to be in perfect shape, good fitness, you have to really be open for, well, non-normative behavior. And Chemsex is something that overcomes these obstacles, so they can forget these obstacles as well, and they seek direct pleasure through disinhibition. So Chemsex is not a problem in itself, it's a solution to a problem which gay men face on, for example, this homosexuality. And we have to be aware when we are getting in touch with participants. We have to be aware of the stigmatization towards them and within the community. So it's not about drugs only, it's about gay sex, it's about homophobia, self-stigma, guilt, and also sexual performance. And in developing these activities, we should approach them with a non-judgmental way. We have to ask them the right question. So being aware that a lot of guilt and shame around chemsex. And this is really we need to take account for. Like harm reduction interventions for people on drugs are widely available. Needles exchange, condoms, and there's a lot of focus on HIV prevention. However, we do need a different approach for men involved in chemsex party scene. So over the years, we have been providing several interventions, and which has been proven to be effective. One of them is making sure that professionals working with MSM are informed on the ins and outs of chemsex. Some feedback we have received from professionals in the training is, now I'm suddenly more aware of the reasons why guys participate in chemsex parties. That there's more than just having fun and a lot of sex. What we also see that online information is very much needed. Online information that it's non-judgmental and based on the different needs from the users. For example, basic information about substances, how to inject in a safe way, but also, okay, I would like to become abstinent, so where do I go? So we designed a website in collaboration with SOA AIDS Netherlands, and we have seen that more than 40,000 visitors in 2019. Another effective example of cooperation is the Amsterdam Chemsex Roundtable. So about 16 organizations, they get together twice a year and share all knowledge and interventions on chemsex. So it's a holistic approach with physical health, mental health, including addiction care, harm reduction, personal safety. Participants in this network that reach out to each other on a daily basis and make sure that problematic chemsex participants can have the access to the support they need. So of course there's more to it than just informing professionals. We, for example, organize drop-in events where users can come and share experiences, how to cope with craving there, and how do I enjoy sex again. We have developed different information communication materials from safe injecting towards more informative and stories from the communities themselves. And this also has been developed in different languages such as Dutch, English, but also Vietnam, as you can see. So also in Europe we supported organizations, and we are aware of organizations who have amazing chemsex interventions. For example, drop-in events, online websites in Spain, online counseling, develop different party packs, for example, where booklets are included, needle syringes, GHB trackers, lubricants, straws, even like a brochure where the rights of users are explained. I think 56 Dean Street is a very famous example. They have a chemsex clinic and they provide online counseling and even self-counseling. You receive email commitments and have weekly check-ins. So these are successful examples from Europe. So I'm a bit aware of the time, so what we do internationally is supporting local organizations to strengthen their harm reduction response. So we help them developing and implementing interventions, and also provide them with trainings, online or face-to-face, to implement these interventions in a really good way. So some examples are, let's say, community-based mental health interventions, developing outreach strategies and screening tools, practicing with motivational interviewing techniques, And even we have finalized the e-learning program, which was funded by the WHO. And this e-learning can be used by organizations to, well, strengthen their response. And this is one example that we are currently supporting. This is a Chemsex harm reduction curriculum that will be developed for KP service providers in Thailand. And we are currently providing technical assistance on the different modules. And it is something what we do in the Asian context as well. So we try to support organizations in developing these kinds of packages, including training to implement them in a quality way. So this was in a nutshell more about the work that we have been doing, the situation about chemsex in the Netherlands, and also some interventions that can be done to improve the health and the rights of MSM engaging in chemsex. If you have more questions, please send me an email and I make sure I respond. So good luck with the symposium and hope to see you in face-to-face sometime when Corona is over. Thank you.
谢谢，以上感谢3位医师主持本段
We would like to thank our 3 doctors as our 3 moderators, and we will now be moving into the Q&A session. We would like to welcome our Dr. Huw back on stage. If you have any questions, feel free to ask our speakers.
会请就是李佳雯医师跟就是亮妤医师跟我们一起就是做我们的 Q&A。那因为水逆的关系，所以呢，我们决定呢，今天中午呢，刚刚没有听到这荷兰部分的这部分的演讲呢，中午的时候，大家午休的时候，我们会重新再播放。所以就是以后记得大家选这个演讲的时候，选这个办活动的时候，不要选有水逆的时候。好，那我们很快的就我们线上基本上会有3位我们的来自我们会有 Adam， 然后我们有来自越南的 Tung， 然后还有来自那个韩国的 Nancho， 然后我们大家现场你可以开放问题，然后我们会用英文翻译给他们这样子。大家有没有什么想要发问的？机会难得15分钟。
This is a very rare opportunity. Please seize it.
好，那我就先来问问题了。我想要就是Hi guys, can you hear us? Who is this? Oh, 这是 outskirts. Yeah. Hello, Adam, can you hear us? Oh, they are coming. Hey. Hello, Nancho. Hi, Adam. Oh, sorry. It must be my microphone. So yeah, we were just started the QA. I was kind of curious about several factors like Nancho and also Tung said about chemsex in Asia. They talk about the price of the drug, so that's why people started to use slamming, for example, because they want to save money in Korea or in Vietnam. They were talking about the power relationship that the drug providers are usually more rich and they're providing drugs to younger generation who might not be afforded, who might not afford the drug. So have you seen these kind of phenomenon in other literatures in Western Europe, for example? I would like to ask it to Adam. Yeah, Adam, can you hear me?
Stefan, sorry, it was a very bad echo.
Oh, sorry.
So we couldn't hear anything. We couldn't hear anything you were saying, I'm afraid.
Okay, so we just say that there's a. Can you hear me right now?
It's much better now.
Okay.
It's much better now.
Okay. So there's quite a few social determinants, such as price issues that driving people to use slamming, for example, in Korea, because the crystal meth is really expensive. And also, Tung talk about the power relationship between those providing who are rich and providing drug, and those who receive drug who are younger and poor. So, do you see this kind of phenomenon in like Western or European or American societies, according to the literature?
Sure. Yes, we do. There is some good qualitative research here in Australia and in France that has documented a lot of transactional sex occurring, particularly between older men and younger men in relation to crystal meth. In some contexts, crystal methamphetamine is quite expensive, and transactional sex provides a means of access to those who couldn't otherwise afford it. I think also your point about the cost of slamming is an important one. It is cheaper, it's considerably cheaper for people to inject small amounts of crystal meth than it is, and they'll get a much more intense high than it is when they smoke it. So it's a cost-efficient means of doing so as well.
Oh, 基本上 Adam 的意思大概是指说，就是老师要翻译吗？好，好，那没关系。那刚才 Adam 大概讲的就是说，其实在国外的一些 literature 上面还是有看到一样的状况啦。好，包括在法国啊，在美国也是看到会有一些交易性的性行为出现。然后的确也是有一些就是说，年纪比较大的年长的男同志会提供药物给年纪比较轻的人，所以这件事情是的确会出现的。Also, I would like to ask another question regarding slamming, because Adam had reviewed that slamming looks like a chemsex with a more elevated form of harm. So we also found the similar situation in Taiwan. So I was just wondering how our Korean friends, also like Tung in Vietnam, how you going to address the harm reduction related to the emerging slamming in the gay community. Let's start it with Tung.
Hi everyone. I'm very happy to be here today, and thank you very much for inviting me, Adam and also Nam from Korea. So in terms of slammings among the chemsex community in Vietnam, we don't see much of people who practice slamming crystal meth or slamming during sex. In our study, we found that like 17% of them have practiced at least one time for slamming. But they say that because it's high very fast, but it's not long, that they have to inject many times during chemsex. So that's why they don't really like to do slamming with crystal meth. But we still, in our habit, we're still working with Global Fund because they provide the free, clean syringes for the people who inject drugs. So we're trying to provide like condom lubricants, materials, but also clean syringes and provide it to the community. And in terms of the information provided to the community, we also provide them on how they can do safe slamming when they inject drugs or when they do slamming during sex. So that is some experiences.
所以刚才 Tung 的讲法应该是说，在越南好像 slamming 不是那么的流行，因为大家觉得它
So it seems that in slamming, in Vietnam, slamming is not popular. So it's high indeed, but it doesn't really maintain very long, and they provide clean syringe and needles.
So how would the situation look like in Korea?
Okay, so hello everybody. Can you guys hear us? Okay, good. In our case, we try to provide appropriate information about STDs and how it can be more easily infected and what kind of STDs can be more easily transmitted. And also, we try to provide information on how to inject appropriately, like your case in Vietnam as well. We try to provide specific information, like which bases to use and which parts are not for good use when you inject.
刚才就是 Nam Cho 的意思是说，在南韩的话，他们会教，就是会提供一些关于 slamming 的一些正确的资讯给使用者。那当然还有就是包括一些性病这部分的筛检。So speaking of STI screening, I think this is very important among users with Chemsex. So I would like to know in your country is that what kind of like STI screening you guys implement for people doing Chemsex, and how do you going to tackle with the increased STI incidence? Because we have the problem with gonorrhea and syphilis and hepatitis C nowadays. The incidents are all increasing in Taiwan. Can we start with Adam?
Of course. I mean, an important thing to recognize here is that in an Australian context, engaging in chemsex are also PrEP users. A very high proportion are using PrEP. So they are already enrolled in a sexual health care program. That means they're tested on a regular basis anyway. And that includes a wide range of syndromic screening and blood testing. Drug-resistant gonorrhea has been a concern in Australia, and there have been some reported cases in Queensland in the north of the country, but it hasn't really become embedded within communities of MSM in other parts of Australia, in the major urban centres. So fingers crossed, thus far it hasn't been a major concern. In outside of PrEP, other than people using PrEP, I guess in most instances we work a lot with GPs, with family doctors, to help them ask sensitive questions about drug use among men who have sex with men, so that they can provide enhanced STI screening in those contexts as well. In Australia, a lot of STI screening is done by family doctors outside of specialist sexual health clinics. So our situation is a bit different.
刚才呢有讲到说，事实上大部分在澳洲就是使用 Chemsex 的人，大概都是已经在使用 PrEP 了，所以他们其实定期会回到 PrEP 的门诊，所以自然而然会有一些定期的筛检，无论有没有症状。那的确在那边的话，他们最近也会担心，就是有药物抗药性的这个淋病。那主要是在澳洲北部的昆士兰的地方，但是其他地方看起来比较还好。但是另外一个有还不错的一个这样子的一个介入方式。是他们会教导就是家庭医师，然后教他们去问一些比较具有比较敏感的问题，这样这个问题就可以找到说，你的 client 是不是真的有用 Chemsex？ 那因为这样的原因，他就可以来做一些加强这些性病的筛检，因为在澳洲其实很多性病的筛检都是由家庭医师在执行。So can we follow by Tung?
In different countries. So in Vietnam, we have very new MSM cohort study conducted by Hanoi Medical University and US CDC, and it's found that there are 42.1% of the MSM in Hanoi has at least one STI. I mean, like gonorrhea, chlamydia, hepatitis B also with HPV as well. And I have to say that the STI service in Vietnam is quite limited. We only have the few government hospitals can provide the HPV testing and STI testing and treatment. And then we have some community clinic who provide the friendly STI check on screening and testing and treatment. But in general, it's very limited services on STI community, especially in rural area and also some remote areas, so people cannot access to STI and services. And you know, for the PrEP, in the PrEP national package, we also provide some STI screening and treatment for the PrEP user. But in our Chemsex study, we also found that with people who are living with HIV or who get infected with STI, they have more unprotected sex than the people who are negative. So that is very interesting when we do the qualitative interview with them. And we did that because HIV is the highest scare. So when they don't fear to do to try different kind of sex. So that is also one very interesting point that I want to raise in here. Like how can we promote lifestyle for MSM and Chemsex community?
越南的 Tung 有讲到说，他们其实资源的关系，所以他们没有办法做那么多的筛检。他们最近的话，在这个河内的这个大学，然后跟这个 UNAIDS 有一些合作，那发现说河内的男同志大概有40%的人可能有任何一种的性病，那所以这样的数字算是高的。那但是他们没有办法在，比如说尤其在这个乡村的话，更难提供这样子的资源。那他也提到了说，在一些 PrEP 的 clinic 中，他们的确也有提供筛检，但是他也发现，如果今天是他有感染性病或是感染 HIV 的人，他其实使用保险套的频率也比较少，所以他也提到说，其实不使用保险套这件事情的确是是一个行为上面需要改变的事情，但这件事情其实相对来说困难，所以他也觉得这边部分是一个很大的问题。So how about in Korea?
Okay, so regarding STDs, STIs, and also HIV, there's a huge stigma against the disease itself, and also because the disease is coming from the sexual activities, and there's a huge lack of conversation about STDs and HIV. And in addition to that, you know, the drug users, the unprotected sex is very prevalent. I'm not sure if you know about the settings there, but you know the unprotected sex is kind of given consensus among Chemsex users, and also because of that, those who engage in Chemsex are much more exposed to STDs, and also the PrEP is not officially available in Korea, so you know it's much more easy. The Chemsex users are much more easily infected by STD. Okay, yeah.
对。就是Namcho 有讲到说这个就是性病这件事情，其实在韩国是非常的就是被污名化的，所以其实大家的确就是去筛检的话会有一些问题。那其实还有讲到说就是也配合的说，因为Chemsex 使用的人没有戴保险套，还有就是说有些人可能在使用 PrEP， 那好像不戴套这件事情是大家理所当然，好，大家都觉得说这是使用 Chemsex 的人的共识，就是不要戴套，所以以至于这样子的原因，所以其实这个 STD 的 PrEP 应该是比较高的。So I have one more last question. Sorry for delay everybody's lunchtime, but I'm just kind of curious that how how the government, the local government, in your country react to COVID might change the practice of, for example, dealing with STIs or HIV in your country. Do you think it's a positive impact or you think it's a negative impact? Can we start with Namcho? because I think Korea has done a very good job on like curtail COVID-19, and whether this causes something like to your HIV policy or change the attitude of the public.
Can somebody else start?
Why don't we start with Adam again?
I needed a minute to gather my thoughts. It varies a lot in Australia. In Victoria, in the state where I live, we had a very large second wave of infection. So we are still in a very, very hard lockdown here. We cannot travel, there are no shops open, etc. So our situation is a bit different. But in the rest of the country, life has returned to normal. I think in the same way is true in Taiwan and in Korea, and in Vietnam, I think as well. And there, local NGOs have been doing a lot of work to try and emphasize the need for testing now that they have left lockdown. So, for example, you haven't been having sex for the last few months because you have been physically restricted. We understand you want to go out and start having sex again now. Please go and have a HIV test, have an STI test before you start doing that. And if we can do that, if everyone who's coming out of lockdown can take a test first, well then we have a remarkable opportunity to capture acute infection, to capture undiagnosed infection within the community, and prevent that onward transmission once people do start having sex again. So it's really the NGOs, it's the community organizations that are leading that kind of drive. I would say the government locally haven't paid it much attention. They're so fixated on COVID, they haven't really given much thought to other health conditions. So it's the community itself which is making this change.
Adam 有说到，就是说他现在住的地方 Melbourne 是维多利亚州，跟其他的这些澳洲的其他地方不一样，其他地方的疫情没有那么严重，所以日子过得差不多跟之前一样。但是他们因为疫情的第二波非常的严重，所以其实也是在封城。那但是在封城的时候，其实政府都忙于就是在这个面对新冠的疫情，其实对于性病这部分的筛检，其实没有再更多的琢磨，反而是一些 NGO 团体，一些这个社群的团体自动的自发，然后就是告诉大家说啊，我知道大家已经被关了很久，你很久没有发生性行为，你之后想要出去发生性行为没有关系，在出门之前先来做筛检，也是说鼓励大家在要准备出门约炮之前，赶快先来做一个筛检的动作，然后来趁机来就是让大家对于这个筛检有这个自我认知的状况。And how about Tung in Vietnam?
Yeah, I think in Vietnam we are a little bit different in this situation that we just overcome the second wave COVID outbreak, and now everything turned to the new normal. We have no new cases for the almost 2 months. So but during the COVID, I think the government they have very positive response to the COVID and also to the needs and issues of people living with HIV. We actually, since the very beginnings of the first COVID cases in Vietnam, the Ministry of Health, Vietnam Administration of HIV/AIDS Control, they have a new guideline for people living with HIV to switch the regimen and also switch the place where they can get the ARV treatment in their province, because we have many travel restrictions, so it's barrier people to come to the big city to get ARV treatment. But then people, the government, they have new guidelines, so it's much easier for the people to get the ARV temporary in the province. However, we still have some difficulties and concern from community related to stigma and discrimination from province, fear of the confidentialities when they get the ARV in their province, because people will know their family and know their faces. So we have inter-province support groups led by the people living with HIV network in Vietnam, and also on different CBO to support a very different case where people out of medications, out of medicine, or people hard to get ARV in their province, or stigma discrimination, or side effect. So it is combined and collaborate between the governments and also community to support for the people with HIV, ensure that they can adhere to HIV and ARV treatment. And I think in terms of the communication, we have the You Go Use campaigns, and we develop an KU case in You Go Use fan page, where we connect a lot of the people with HIV in whole Vietnam, and we also work with government to have some live stream, update people on the new guidelines, on the new, decisions from the governments on quarantine, how they can get ARV in quarantine. So, reaching out the community through different channels and make sure that they can be updated, the newest information from the governments, also very important in this case. In terms of STI, and some CBO, they have a lot of innovation to support for the community to get the HIV prevention, like condom, lubricants, and syringes, and other protected products for the COVID. Like one CBO in Ho Chi Minh City, they developed a COVID packet with the face masks, with condom and lubricants, with HIV cell test kit, and deliver it to home of the key population and community. And we also provide different kinds of counseling for community, like mental health counseling, to make sure that people feel okay when they are in quarantines or they in lockdown situation. And lastly, about the STI, I have to say, even that there are no COVID crisis, STI is still left behind of many conversations and strategies of the governments. Most people target on HIV, and like 1999 goals, and STI is not becoming priorities, but it's there. It's in fact of the community, and I think in the new conversation we need to highlight and emphasize how important to eliminate STI and reduce STI needs among the community, and also with Chemsex community as well. Thank you.
Tung 的意思是说，像越南目前的疫情都控制得蛮好，所以其实状况都还蛮跟之前是一样。但是在刚开始有疫情来的时候，其实政府很快的就针对 HIV 这部分的国家的政策有一些新的 guideline、新的指引出来，主要是让大家以前可能都要到大城市或是去跨自己的地方去拿药，让他们可以在当地就可以拿药。但是当地拿药这边还是有些问题，比如说会面对到当地拿药有曝光，甚至有一些这个标签化的问题，所以他们也成立一些就是在这些当地的进行一些这些支持团体，然后目的是为了减少就是说因为就地拿药取药所造成的问题。那当然，如果当这些COVID-19 比较严重的时候，大家都在这个封城或是都在隔离的时候，其实有些也是有 NGO， 他们会透过线上的方式来跟大家就是做一些教育的活动。那同时他们也会有这种就是 Uber 送你这个 COVID package， 好，它里面可能会有保险套，然后润滑剂、针头，然后还有包括像是这个药品以及这个所谓的口罩这些东西，然后来提供这样服务。那当然他也提到说，其实性病的这部分，其实大家都把重点焦点放在2020年，我们达到90，可是其实性病一直来都不是不是放在我们的重点，所以这件事情其实是应该要注意的。Okay, can we just finish by Nanchu?
Okay, so I'm not sure if I understood your question correctly, but I think that you asked about how the COVID-19 experiences are related to the HIV/AIDS and STD experiences in Korea. So, is it correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it seems like government is controlling the disease very efficiently, but at the same time, there's a huge invasion to personal lives in Korea. For example, in Korea, the COVID-19 seems like it's under control, but a lot of the personal data is released to the public. For for example, if I get infected and my moving pattern for the entire week is released to the public, which means that, my identity can be easily revealed to people that might know me. So, that would bring the stigma to me. And that's a very similar experience for HIV/AIDS as well. So at the beginning of the HIV/AIDS pandemic in Korea, I'm not sure if I can call it a pandemic here, but HIV/AIDS experience, like 20 years ago, government collected a lot of personal data from, people living with HIV/AIDS, and they think that they controlled the disease, but at the same time, they invaded lives of who just got infected as well. And so one of the big success of the HIV/AIDS activism is that the anonymous testing for HIV became available to the community. So that was a big success. And but it's also connected to the experience that we have now. There is a small wave of new infection in Korea evolving around gay clubs. So there was the media, the media attacked our community. So they started talking about, bad houses and sex lives of gay people, and the gay activism consulted with the government, and the anonymous testing for the community became available, and those experiences got linked together, and we saw the similarities in that.
就是南球有谈到，就是说，在南海的话，他觉得虽然政府控制这个南海的疫情控制得很好，但是的确造成了就是私人权利或是个人隐私权上面的一个侵犯。那就像当年的60年多前的 HIV 的状况一样，就比如说你被诊断了 COVID， 然后你过去1个礼拜你的所有的行踪都会被大家就会被公诸于世，所以其实对大家来说是压力很大。那他就想起说，20年前的话，因为 HIV 这样子的状况，所以后来有了所谓的匿名筛检。那南海也是在之前的时候，有在梨泰院的某一个就是同志的夜总会，然后也被爆出来说有 COVID-19 群聚的现象。那这样子结果出来后，就造成很多记者就是开始来挖这些隐私的内容，所以他们当地的一些同志的组织就跟政府建议说，应该要做匿名筛检。所以之后呢，他们对于 COVID 这部分也开始有了匿名的筛检，这是他从 HIV 之前的过去的经验，然后发展到现在南海对于 COVID-19 的一些政策。So I think it's a very great pleasure to have everyone here in such a pandemic. I would really hope to see you guys very soon in person sometimes. Okay, yeah. So yeah, we hope. So let's give a applause to all the speakers today, and thank you for staying online and sharing your experience with us. Okay, bye bye.
谢谢我们3位国际讲师。那我们也谢谢我们3位医师，请入席就座。